So I'm back in the shop today, and just picking up where I left off. And so far today, all I've done is put the green onto the leg mechanical parts, the sort of inside portions there. And I've started the weathering process by using the airbrush to pick out the recesses of certain areas. And I'm using Liquitex transparent raw umber. That'll just be the first color. I'll probably use a couple of others. This kind of begins the aging process, and by putting it into the recesses, it looks like the beginnings of rust and maybe some dirt buildup. And I don't think I mentioned this yesterday, but prior to painting, I actually used liquid green stuff to create a texture on the Dozer blade here, mostly in this area and then up in the corners here. I actually have a snowplow that I mount on my four-wheeler, and I kind of know how that rusts. So I thought I would I'd make it look like, possibly some dirt and rust build up here, and then rust starting to come through in the edges. And, nobody's had a chance to really sand it down and repaint. So, it's starting to buckle the paint. And I may actually rust that somewhat before I'm done. So for now, I'm going to continue with my this is really kind of a filter, I guess. And because it's transparent, it's a transparent color, I don't have to worry about it building up too quickly, which is nice. You don't. This is a filter and not, a full color, so you don't want it to. You don't want to get a hard line with it. You may not even be able to see it doing anything yet, but it's a process that takes a while. Yeah, those little recesses, definitely want to make sure it builds up in there. I've mentioned this before, and if you've watched my other videos, that you know that whenever I do weathering, I try to make sure that I'm trying to keep the fiction of what I'm doing sort of realistic. So in this case, I've got these little protrusions and then this recess, and those would be catch points for water, which means that dirt, grime, and rust are all going to build up in those areas. So I want to make sure that, even though I don't want this to be a an overly rusted hulk, the discolorations from dirt and rust should all be internally consistent. And that means, just putting it in those areas where it's going to happen. any vehicle in the field isn't going to get, you know, the kind of maintenance that you might give your car. So again, even if you don't want it to look severely weather beaten, there's just certain things that are going to happen regardless on a vehicle. No matter how much the crew might try to keep things nice, it's still going to build up. You know, we don't have a lot of time to keep it clean. The other thing that's kind of nice about this is that it'll end up breaking up some of the contrast between the various bits of the camouflage and making the whole thing look more uniform, a little bit more like it's all part of a whole. So that'll be nice. You know, when you first pull off that mask, the differences are pretty stark. Okay, I'm going to go get this done, and I will be back. So I skipped ahead a little bit, as happens, well, pretty much all the time when I'm working on these projects. What I did last, well, what you saw last was I was working on the raw umber airbrushing. And I think you can see, you know, the various places where that ended up. I did some areas where, you know, condensation builds up and streams down the side of the tank, which leads to buildup of grime and or possibly rust. And then I kind of faded the whole thing a bit with a very, very light dusting of Vallejo sand yellow and mixed with a lot of airbrush medium. And you can kind of see where there's some faded highlights on high points, and I did a little bit on the hull, and that just, you know, again breaks up the color a little bit more. Adds a little bit more fading due to exposure to sunlight, you know, that kind of thing, you know, where the paint is, the pigment in the paint is starting to fade. And now I've created a very, very thin wash of black and raw umber. As you can see here, it's very thin. And I'm using this as kind of a pin wash to bring out some contrast in some of the deep recesses. And for example, inside the legs, the mechanical portion of the legs, I'd really kind of like that to be, I really like the bits in there to stand out a bit, the bits to stand out a bit more. So here it's really more of being an overall wash as opposed to a pin wash. But when I was doing it, well, let's say for example, on the back here, I just dabbed it onto each one of the rivets in between the doors, up around the hinges, inside all of this detail. And that's a wash I made myself using Liquitex airbrush medium, which is kind of my universal medium for many uses. And a little Joe Sonia carbon black and raw umber. And so that's just picking out details. You can see it in here. And it provides more depth. And really gives it a lot more dimensionality. So, that is what I'm working on now. And I really need to do these legs, and then I'll do the underside here. I've got all these little areas to do. And of course I need to get it around the panels themselves. If I've done this thin enough, I can be a little bit sloppy with it, and it'll tend to recede into the recess. Okay, I wasn't gonna do this, but sort of got started. You know what? Okay, so I did these legs. I can tell because I also did these three mounting points here. And I have not done these three mounting points. So, let me see, what were, it was on this leg, okay. Yeah, again, the mechanical parts of this leg are getting a full-on wash and not a pin wash. Yeah, the other legs are still drying. It doesn't look too bad. And I don't want to call too much attention to those legs. There's a lot of detail there, and it would be very easy to sort of overdo it, you know. If you put too much color into there, it'll start distracting from the rest of the vehicle. And the truth is, military vehicles tend to get a very monotone paint outside of things like camouflage. There shouldn't be a lot of, even on a sci-fi military vehicle, you shouldn't have a lot of excess color floating around unless you're doing something anime. But this, no. I am going to go back in, and there's some hoses here that I'll probably paint dark gray. You know, you do want to break up the color somewhat. And then there's a little pistons on each of the legs, and there should be a shiny metal portion on each one of those. If you've ever seen hydraulics, there's always the ram portion that is super shiny, like chrome metal. So I'll be going back in to do that as well. Yeah, make these washes thin enough that it really only provides that really contrasty line in the deep recesses, and then it just becomes more of a filter on flat surfaces. Okay, so now that I got that, so I just touch these rivets. Make sure that the wash goes around the outside edge. And then around the panel. I think this wash is a little bit heavier than my last one. That's okay. Alright, well, I'm going to finish up the rest of this, and it's going to be tedious work. You don't necessarily need to watch it, and I'll be back in a bit. So I just noticed that I didn't have any insignia on this thing. So I cut myself a new stencil using the silhouette, and I'm going to just carefully spray this on here. It's the stencil is only attached to the hole there with this tape, so these areas that have no tape are slightly raised, which means I don't want to get too much paint on there. It's going to slide under and kind of fog it up, so I'm going to try to avoid that. And I'm not using white, by the way. This is Ulthuan Gray. White would just be way too stark, especially since I'm kind of doing this late in the day after I did so much of my other weathering. So if I can keep it more tied in with the hull by not making it too bright, that would be best. Now I'm just seeing if I can dry that out. I'm going to get another coat on there. Alright. Alright, that should be good. Let's take a look. Fantastic. That looks reasonably good. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, actually. All right. It's not going to sit properly because of those little plates that are right there. So I'll just have to be even more careful with this one. I also want to make sure I'm going straight down. If I go at an angle, it'll go up underneath, so I just want the paint to fall and not spatter like that. lots of air, not too much paint. Just really want it to dry as it gets there. All right. Just drying it again. And hit it one more time. Just get it a little bit brighter. All right, that looks good. Not bad. You know, and really the the overspray ends it a little, gives it a little bit of authenticity as well, because that is something that happens in real life. So well, that's not too bad. All right. Well, I'm going to continue. Well, before I continue on, let me. Well, obviously, I've gotten the Dozer blade on there, and I've been doing some of the metallics. If you can see the feet, have gotten some metallics on it. The blade, of course, I'm going to do a little brighter silver on the leading edge of that. What else? I'm not really doing too much chipping. I did some wear on the edges here because that's a logical place for wear to happen. But at the same time, I get the impression that this is something, it's not moving too fast. It's not necessarily kicking up a lot of dust. And so the Dozer blade is the thing that's the most likely to pick up scratches and scrapes. And bullet holes, which are something that I added at the very beginning. And just for fun, I added some chain. The chain comes from like the local craft store. I added some some realistic rust both to the chain itself and to these little connection points. That is sort of a faux finishing kit that I got, and this is an iron surfacer and then a rusting solution that goes over that, and of course it makes for a super realistic rust, which is what I've got back there. These kinds of things are going to rust a ton because the paint's just going to get knocked right off of them, and yeah, they're not going to hold up well to weather. So at this point I am just looking around for extra things to do to bring out more interesting detail. And I'm going to continue on with that. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't. I hadn't really thought past the stenciling of the stars. So let me give it some thought, and I'll come back to you. I'm going to jump right in here with some weathering that I'm doing. Now, let's first talk about, you know, the direction I'm going with the weathering. And as those of you who have watched my previous videos know, I usually try to have an idea in mind as to the story of the vehicle before I weather it. And so for this one, the idea is that this is an important vehicle. It's gotten a lot of care, but like any vehicle in the field, not as much as, you know, it's not going to look like it's straight from a museum. So even with the very beginnings of the paint, I was already doing some hints of rust down the sides, and well, and then, you know, collecting in some of the recesses and stuff, but nothing too severe. But when I got to the back end, I added this chain, and I think I mentioned this last time. When I added the chain, I wanted to do some more detailed. Oh, look at that! I got a tear in my glove. Some more detail in the weathering. And let me see if we can get a reasonable close-up on that. So that's what the chain and the mounting points and some of those hinges look like back there. And that's because those are going to get beaten around a lot, and the paint's not going to stay on, and they're just, no matter what you do, they're going to get rusty if it's in the field for any length of time. But once I did that, I started looking at the underside. And although you're not really going to want to see, or you're not going to see this much as you're playing the game, this is part of the story, you know, and in completing the overall vehicle, I would be remiss were I not to pay some attention to that. So the underside is going to get more weathering than the top side of the hull. And here I've rusted up like where this panel goes on and around to, you know, more or less to all of the bolts that you can find around here. And then I started hitting the legs a little bit too. I think you can see like in here and down here. And what I've been using, you know, now that I think about it, I don't know, I haven't edited the other video yet, so I don't know if I've talked about this. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. Well, I know I haven't talked about it in any detail, but let's talk about it now. This is Sophisticated Finishes. This is really sort of a faux rust finish that I found at Michael's. And really it's not a faux finish because you're actually using rust to create rust. And how does this work? Well, you got a two-part process. This is your iron metallic surfacer, and this is like your paint. Alright, so it just looks like medium gray paint. And I don't know, let's see if you can actually see this. I got some magnets here. And look closely at the paint. Yeah, so that's actual... Oh, that's no good. That's actual iron filings in this paint. And now that's going to be a real pain to get off of there. I thought it was... Last time I did this, it just... It sort of pulled up a little bit, and you could kind of see the iron filings within the paint. But yeah, this time not so much. Anyway, so the idea is that you paint that on to your surface, and when that's dry, you use the rust antiquing solution. And in this case, the rust antiquing solution is ammonium chloride and copper sulfate. And what that does is it forces the iron in the metallic surfacer to rust. And it's a pretty fun process, and nothing looks more like rust than rust. So if you're looking to get a rusty finish on stuff, here, this is the, you can see I've used it around the bullet holes here too. And, you know, around this edge, and, well, anyway, if you really want something to look rusty, nothing looks more rusty than rust. And so I've been really happy with how this works. Now, the downside of using this is control and time. Painting it would have been faster because the effect, it's really hard to predict how it's going to react. I've tried applying this thinly, I've tried applying it thickly, I've tried applying the antiquing solution thinly and thickly, or, you know, in various methods, and it doesn't always react the way you'd think. And the more of the surfacer that is on the piece that you're trying to rust, the more of an effect you'll get. So trying to rust these little bolts has been very unpredictable. Sometimes it doesn't look like I've done anything, and sometimes it sort of sprouts this light orange or pale orange circle around the outside, and I think it's just where the solution kind of pools and it sits and it creates a reaction. Sometimes you get some flaky white residue, like I think you can see there, right? Oh, here, let's flip it around this way. There, I should be able to see that. See down in here? That's okay. You can take a brush and a little bit of the solution and wipe it away with the solution. It'll come right off. Or you can leave it because it also has a kind of realistic feel to it, but it may not be what you're looking for. Sometimes you get a really deep orangey brown, like super deep, and it looks really nice, like old rust. And sometimes you get that brighter rust, like you can see in here, right? And it's really hard to tell what direction that's going to go when you do it. So you kind of play around with it and you experiment, and it's fun. The results are fantastic, but it takes a lot of time. So it's not the fastest process in the world. So what else have I done recently? Well, aside from playing with magnets and iron paint and rust and what have you, I magnetized the guns because it was just way too loose on there, and the guns were just falling off. I mean, they kind of have a nice fit, but this thing is really super loose. It's okay, like when this is on, when the Dozer blade is on, it sits nice at a nice level. The flamethrower, not so much, but at least I know neither one of them is going to just randomly fall off during play. Yeah, there we go. And that one's not going to come off at all. Yeah, there we go. The magnets are really tough, really strong magnets. So today, what I'm going to be doing is just more weathering. So, and I think I'm just about done. I have a few more areas that I want to rust on the underside and on the legs, like I've been doing. You know, there's a few areas here that I forgot, or either that or the solution didn't actually rust them as I'd hoped the first time around. So I'm going to go over them again. And then I'm going to start adding dirt and, griming it up just a bit, and mostly again down at the bottom level, not on top of the hull. I might add a little bit of dirt on top, but I don't want to overdo it. I don't want this to look like a Russian tank that's been sitting out all winter in the weather. I want this to look field used, but well kept. So I'm going to go work on that some, and I will be back. So there it is. And yeah, we're pretty much done here. Let's talk a little bit about what we did. Let me take this off because it's always in danger of having something bad happen to it. All right, so since the last little segment, I essentially finished all the weathering, and what that meant for this was a little bit more of the rust, and specifically on the feet pads. And I did the tops, right? Let's turn this so that you can see it a little better. So the top edge of the pads, I feel like, you know, there's a reasonable chance of that weathering and not necessarily, you know, being shiny clean. So that got a coat of the metal finish, and then it got the antiquing solution. And luckily, and I didn't want it to go orange, I wanted it to be that sort of dark brown, and I got that. So I was pretty pleased about that. And then I started doing a wash that I made using 3 colors of weathering powder, sort of desert tan or desert yellow, a dirt brown, and a little white to brighten it up. Mix that with a lot of water and a little bit of matte medium, and then just started hitting all of the recesses and places where you know, dirt might collect, and not too much, right? The worst, most dirty places are here. Let's get a close up. It's the inside of the leg mechanisms, and again, I'm just trying to follow my story about how this would weather and how it might be maintained. And so there we go. You can see inside of that little area there that dirt has really collected. It's going to collect in there because it's, you know, there's just lots of little nooks and crannies. And so, and it would take a lot of effort to try to keep that clean all the time. You can also see some rust in there. I wanted to sort of differentiate some of the metal. And then you can kind of see how the pad is shiny metallic along the outside, but then on the top it's dirty and rusty, but not overly so. So that was where I took that, and then I also used that to go into, you know, any recesses that look like they're just going to collect dirt. You know, in this seam here, in this seam, there's a little sort of panel line right there. You know, anywhere where it looks like it's going to rain on it, dust that's sitting on the top is going to collect into that rainwater, and then it's going to sort of make a home in some of those recesses. And so I did that. And then one of the final things I did, and you may not be able to see it on this, I used a pencil, like just a standard number 2 pencil, and I hit a lot of the sharp edges. And what that does is it provides just a hint of metallic. It provides a nice little catch light. It's almost like doing edge highlighting, but in a more realistic fashion than, you know, painting this, you know, painting the edge like a light green or something. And so just at certain angles, in the right lighting, you'll see this sort of metallic glint come off of those areas. And that was after, of course, after the clear coat. Speaking of clear coat, I've been using the Army Painter matte finish for a while now, and overall I like it. I think I have issues with almost every rattle can clear coat that I've used, but the one I'm getting from the Army Painter is rather annoying, though not a complete deal breaker. And that is that when I get down to about half a can, maybe a little less, the dulling agent, which is talc or whatever, collects into little balls and sticks to the surface in various spots. And so then you have these just little white flecks in various points. And I have to go in with a knife and excise them. And it's not a ton, but it's kind of annoying. And it is... it's a pain in the ass. And so what that really means is that whenever I get down to half a can of Army Painter matte spray, that happens, and then I throw the can away. And so I'm really only getting half of the use out of it. I actually really like Tester's Dull Coat, but my problem with that has been recently that it just doesn't dull all that much anymore. And I'm not sure why. So sometimes I get a good can, but mostly it's at best like a semi-gloss. So I don't know. The other thing I did is I went in and hit all of the little hydraulic pistons and made sure that they were shiny. Now, if you know anything about hydraulic pistons, I mean, they have to be shiny. It's just like a chromed metal, and it's constantly going back and forth into the little into its little receptacle, and it's doing its job. So yeah, those all need to be shiny, and that the contrast between the shininess of those pistons and the weathering of everything else is pretty cool too. I also used the pencil on the guns and on these machine guns. Although really on these machine guns I didn't just use the pencil. I realized that I had some lubricant, some graphite lubricant, and I rubbed that over these, and the graphite looks great on guns. If you're looking for a realistic gunmetal effect, graphite is fantastic. But again, wait until you're done doing your clear coat. And so something else I did after clear coat is the tail lights there. That's to me a clear red. And I could have used the Minotaur ghost tints for that. But you know what? Tamiya has been my go-to for years, and I went ahead and did that, even though it takes forever to dry. So that turned out okay. And that was that it? I think that was it. A lot of weathering, just a lot of weathering. And I had meant to have more to sort of show as I went along, but as you all know, whenever I get to this point, I have a tendency to barrel on towards the end. And there's the other gun there too. So that's what I did. So that is it for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'm constantly amazed at the viewership that I have, and I appreciate the fact that you all spend time with me. So yeah, thank you for that, and I will have more for you well, next week for sure, but I might have some stuff before that. I have some ideas in mind I have another photography video that I want to do, and I got some ideas from You Know Who You Are about how I can move forward with that, and some other things as well. So we'll just see what kind of time I have. And so the next up after this is going to be I'm still waiting on that final Drop Zone Commander Scourge piece. It's been over a month. I emailed Hawk Wargames again, trying to find out if they ever ship that thing. It's entirely possible that it is just one of those things that got stuck in customs, and that is the reality of overseas shipping today, that these things happen. But it's really frustrating. But So I have that. I have some Super Dungeon Explorer minis. I have another Hordes piece. I have more Doom minis. And for those of you that don't know, check the early videos on my channel. I appear to be the unofficial official Doom miniatures painter. And these are the old Reaper minis, not the board game minis. And then what else? Oh, yes. So I am also in discussions with the gentleman who purchased this to do a terrain project. And I have been dying to do a terrain project for a long time, and I'm very excited about it. I'm working with a buddy of mine to do some preliminary sketches, and then we'll move on from there. But that can't happen until I finish all those other projects. Oh, yeah, one other one I forgot because it was a recent addition is I have Mercs minis. So that'll be a first for me. I've never done minis for Mercs before, although I did own some for a while. Anyway, that's about it for now. Thank you so much for watching, as I've already said, and I will talk to you later.